We're gonna welcome Neliana Fuenmayor. She's from Venezuela. She's a rock star. Neliana is a designer, innovator, and public speaker specialized in sustainable fashion innovation. So she mixes fashion and innovation. She's the founding director of a transparent company, a consultancy working since 2016 with key industry partners to deliver solutions to increase trust in the fashion sector. Transparency, all of us need that. Neliana graduated from the London College of Fashion 10 years ago, and in 2015, she completed her master's in fashion entrepreneurship and innovation. Also, in 2015, Neliana won the coveted Kering Award for sustainable fashion for Stella McCartney and enabled the world's first garment tracked on blockchain. She is currently working with multi-holder initiatives to create new industry guidelines. Neliana is also Associate Lecturer at the University of the Arts London for Fashion, Sustainability, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation. Please welcome Neliana Fuenmayor.
No. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for your invitation. I was meant to be here a year ago, but I didn't have a visa to get in, so I'm in now. Yeah, I think this is such an important session, and I want to thank you for being here and for Miami Fashion Week and the summit to focus on sustainability and technology, which are the topics that we need to be discussing now in our current state of fashion as an industry. As Andrea mentioned, I'm the founder of a transparent company. We are a consultancy, London-based, but we think locally, so we think global, but we care about local talent. And our mission is to accelerate positive impact in the fashion industry. Purpose and transparency drives trust. And for me, there's nothing more important than the foundation that trust allows to exchange anything of value. If we think about our relationships today, whether it's family, friends, or when we trust a service or a business, it's all based on trust. And trust is rather easy to build, but is really hard to rebuild. So once we have something of value, we want to take care that exchange happens in the best way possible. And this is not necessarily the case in fashion supply chains, for instance. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm actually a fashion designer. I moved from Venezuela to London in 2006 with the dream of becoming the new Carolina Herrera, possibly. I enjoy my days in my BA, and when I reached the third year of my course, it was 2008. Remember that year, credit crunch? So students, we had to become very creative at how we're going to create our collections. And I remember these fur companies will come and sponsor students with these beautiful, amazing, crazy furs. And I was one of the students that said no, even though I needed money to get materials. And I decided to go back home, learn from the artisans, weavers from where I'm from in the Andes, and recreate aesthetics that will assimilate the fur aesthetics. And then mix them with luxury fabrics and tailoring techniques that I learned from my BA. So I'm a true believer that limitation drives creativity. And in 2009, I graduated, and I happened to be the first self-claimed sustainable fashion designer. And that was the same year the Center of Sustainable Fashion was funded. So that was a very important year for our industry. It's been 10 years also since Copenhagen Fashion Summit was funded. So this is a very important year, and I just want to emphasize that we're all here in this room for a very good reason. And transparency came into my world when I realized that sustainability was sending mixed messages. And I realized that what was lacking was the lack of transparency. lack of trust. So in 2013, I launched after working in the industry for brands like Burberry or Pringles of Scotland and Stella McCartney, I decided to launch my own company and a label called Ether Studios, which actually was part of not just a label. So we used that platform to communicate our brand that was based in London, Stockholm. Actually, I co-founded it with a Venezuelan friend of mine that we met in London. But I saw the opportunity to use transparency to connect the story of products directly with the consumer and have that exchange, again, of trust and engagement between the product, the brand, the story, and the consumer. So I've been an advocate for transparency in fashion since 2013. That journey led me to understand that, unfortunately, the industry was not necessarily ready for the brand, and so I was lucky enough to get a scholarship, and I went back to school and I did my MA, and I focused sustainable business and entrepreneurship for transparency in fashion. And as you mentioned, yeah, that led me to explore how could transparency be part of the strategy at the core of communications for brands. And this is when I decided to implement what I was already learning into Stella McCartney's communication strategy on their sustainable products and highlight and elevate what they were trying to communicate. So yeah, that year, the Kering Award was the first partnership with London College of Fashion that lasted for 5 years. And I was lucky enough to be the winner, which led me to understand that there's so much more to do. And, well, that was a time when a lot of people were starting to discuss more about sustainability, but I was already beyond that, and I was talking about transparency, and I remember actually people asking me, do you mean like chiffon fabric and organza? And I was like, no. I mean, how can we make sure that what we read on a label is true? So yesterday we were discussing about, is sustainability a trend? Is it here to stay? For me, sustainability is a way of living. And it's just embedded in me and everything I do. I always try to do it on a sustainable way. When I was doing my business master's, it's funny because people were talking about sustainable businesses. And I'm like, I can't believe like the financial world uses that word just for money when the graph goes up. And when we talk about sustainability in fashion, it's like something totally different. And I'm like, no, this is exactly the Venn diagram that we need to put together. Do I want to be sustainable? Do I care, right? And then, how can I make my business sustainable? And with the best practices in order to then be able to create an impact in the world. One of the problems today is the linear mindset. We come from the 20th century, push of creating everything as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, and we got the globalization. And that created linear business models, linear supply chains, linear products, meaning take, make, dispose. And this mentality has taken us to these type of issues that we have today. And it's getting closer to home, and when the fire is so close to home, we panic, right? And this is how I see the transition from a linear mindset to a circular one, that we need to start making the invisible visible, like Lauren was saying yesterday. We need to start thinking about how can we be connected around the world and distributed. How can we break the silos and we can open up the information? How can we make supply chains, in this case, move from being fragmented to connected? I don't know if you, probably yes, most of you know who Greta Thunberg is. She's a 16-year-old girl from Sweden, and she decided to strike for climate every Friday. I feel very close to her because she was saying how she was looking at all these headlines and watching all these videos about what's happening in the world and everything is melting and fires everywhere. And she just panicked. And she just said she took action. She decided to go and sit in front of the Swedish parliament and strike for climate. Now this is a global movement. She's in Time magazine, ID magazine, and what this girl is saying is she's like, I don't want to be famous or a celebrity, I just want you to panic because yes, our house is on fire and this is our home. This is the first picture ever taken from space in 1972 from Apollo 17. And this picture for me means a lot, not only because my dad is an astronomer, and my mom actually, she's a fashion maker. So for me, it's like looking at what's home for us and how do we make the link of empathy between all those things that we don't see, all those problems around the world that we don't understand, because we live in a very complex world. So if the house is on fire, we need to panic, and all that Greta Thunberg is making us do is just to stop talking and let's just act. Let's do something that means something. She was the only girl sitting on a Friday afternoon in front of the parliament, and now there's more than 150 countries where kids are striking every Friday and parents are realizing this. So I just leave you with the message of no little action is too little. So this curiosity and understanding the problems of fashion, I realized I didn't want to be part of the problem. I love design, I love creativity, I love touching fabrics, I love the whole process, it's beautiful. But I decided to leave my scissors on the side and understand how can I be part of that solution? How can we embrace new technologies that are helping other industries to move forward? So the 20th century was all about making, taking, and disposing, and we're moving towards a circular economy that is calling us for how can we regenerate, how can we use things that already exist, and how can we prolong their life? When I was doing my dissertation and master's, I was looking at how can transparency be possible at all? How can you trust, how can we believe what a label says? I was looking for a solution where we could actually verify that what it says on the label, like 100% organic or fair trade, is actually true. So through my research, I stumbled upon blockchain. A good friend of mine, she has a software company, and she was explaining how something that is so digital that comes from like cryptocurrencies can be applied in the physical world. So if you look here, this is what just Stefan was discussing. We live in our industry in a very complex situation where the brand doesn't necessarily know where the raw material comes from, and they don't know if the farmer is actually being paid fairly, or the supplier actually outsources and contracts subcontractors, and this is where child labor or modern slavery can actually happen. And this is a huge risk for brands that are claiming certain things without actually knowing. And I can tell you 90% of the brands, most of them don't know where the raw material comes from. So in terms of technology and information, this means that this information is fragmented, sits in silos. Some certifications are paper. Some of them are in old computers that don't interoperate with other new systems. So we are living in this first 25 years of the 21st century where we need to understand that we cannot solve our current problems with old tools. We need to create that same language and make formats talk to each other. So I understood that perhaps blockchain could help the transition from linear thinking into a circular mindset and economy, where all the actors of a supply chain are actually connected in one layer. And the incentive for transparency is based on reputation and mitigating risk, as well as complying with governance and legislations. Nobody wants to be part of a bad story. So if you are able to understand what the other actor before you, your supplier, claims to be, and actually you receive a batch of cotton that is not the right cotton that you order, there's going to be that levels of mistrust. So that's why in the beginning of the talk I was talking about how that trust is so important. I had to try to understand blockchain back then, and I've been like the blockchain girl in fashion. I am not a software engineer whatsoever, but I had to understand and get into the technology world and understood that without technology, there's not going to be sustainability. And if we're here talking about sustainable fashion, I'd like to invite you to think about sustainable fashion innovation. So what happens here is that data actually is secured because each transaction happens with a timestamp, with a time and place, and allows for this information to be verifiable, which is exactly what I was trying to look. How can you actually know that what you're reading is true? So that took me to the journey of tracing the first garment ever on blockchain in 2017. We enabled a collaboration between Danish designer Martin Jarlark and Provenance, a software company based in London, to track end-to-end a supply chain in the UK on alpaca. And it's funny how alpacas and the Andes somehow still follow me in my journey. So it's very interesting because Martine Jarlar, she named this collection State of Emergency, because it's all about like, guys, we need to do something. We are entering a very fragile moment, and this is how our planet is. So it all fits very beautifully. There's a video that I wanted to show you, but it's rather long. I'll invite you later to watch it. If you just put on YouTube blockchain fashion, you'll find the documentary we did with Fashion Innovation Agency in London. And what we did basically is at the end, the garment has a smart label inside of the garment, the care label, where you can actually scan and you can see the journey that will pop on your phone, as well as in the swing tag. Technology is not necessarily, no. The technology is there. We are not adapting to technology as quick as possible, but at that time, in Europe, QR codes were not as used as it is now. So we also enable it with NFC, and I'll tell you more about NFC in a second. So this leads me to understand, well, after this project, many things happened. It was the first reference in the fashion industry on how could blockchain actually help verify claims that a brand has, and how you can actually connect a whole supply chain, and suppliers find the value of actually being part of the story. Fashion is a very secretive industry, like sharing information is definitely not open source friendly, but I think we're moving from a competitive advantage world into a collaborative advantage world, in the sense that we all share the same problems, and if we don't come together, we're not going to find a solution. So I've been working with smaller brands to help them tell the story, but one thing is very important that I figure out. Without mapping and helping them map their supply chain, the technology is not going to help at all. So there's a whole huge phase of discovery for brands to learn how to choose their suppliers. So Being London is a brand that does these beautiful bags made out of recycled leather. So what we did to help them communicate the beautiful story of the product is to enable them with NFC tags. One of the NFC means near field technology. So I'm just going to show you a small demo to show you why I believe that products can talk by themselves. So the idea is that I just run my phone through the product, and it's going to enable me to see the supply chain of the product, which looks something like this. So we call them contactless labels. Basically, it's like when you pay Apple Pay or when you pay with your card anywhere. So the idea is that allows you to see the story of the product. So just to give you a bit of, I can show you this later if you want, but the idea is as a consumer, you will have the option, the ability to start seeing what are the highlights of the product, and if you want to go deeper, I call them levels of transparency. One thing that is very interesting is that when you're in the whole supply chain world, nobody talks about design. As a designer, I feel very insulted, because to be honest, design is the first step where you choose the material you're going to use, and that's the moment where you choose 100% cotton over a blend fabric that's going to be very difficult to recycle. So in the case of Bean, Genia, the founder, she went through, oh, and her story is really amazing because she's actually an ex-BBC journalist. And she decided to do something about the problem of waste. And she found this supplier where the offcuts of leather are being shredded in a way that then can be reformed in this material without heavy chemicals or water. It's incredible. And then all the recycling, the lining is made out of recycling bottles and it's got certifications. So it's just for you to actually see. If you have questions, you can ask, but at least you have information. That's why I put this slide here. Transparency is access to information. And once you have information, you can choose whether you want to ignore it or actually take action. One of the things I'm working on at the moment, it's exactly how to connect the dots in the industry and how to create a universal format in which all of us can connect the data points to actually measure and create a benchmark where all of the industry, the big brands, the luxury brands, the fast fashion brands, can map out what's the complexity and how we can actually transition from just talking to actually doing. So at the moment, I'm doing a research project with SAC, Sustainable Product Coalition. They have a tool called the HIG, where it allows brands to measure the social impact mainly. And SADHC is a foundation that came out of the Greenpeace campaign of detox fashion in 2007, where they were putting pressure on brands to detox fashion, meaning take care of your chemicals. So the two multi-stakeholder initiatives, they advise brands and they give tools to the brands such as LVMH, to Primark, to Levi's, to all of the chemical companies and suppliers to understand how to actually comply with regulations, legislations. So this is my world now. I am trying to bring in the notion of how blockchain, or how we call it distributed ledger technologies, can help the industry to convey into one single source of truth. And this is one of the main, most important movements right now, the Sustainable Development Goals, which give us 17 ways of actually saving our world by 2030 by complying to one of those goals. I really invite you to Google it if you haven't read them yet. I'm focused on Sustainable Goal 9 and 12, which is technology and conscious consumerism. But there's lots of information there. I really invite you. Also, we collaborated with Business of Fashion on the State of Fashion report in 2019 on the radical transparency section. I really invite you to take a look at it. It's so important, all the reports that people are putting together with all information, and there's no excuse. So going back to Greta's inspiring way of action versus talking, the information is there. We just need to make that an action. So I just want to leave you with a thought that I have been thinking a lot about in this political world that we live in, where everything is going bonkers. I'm from Venezuela, as you know, so my country is like a mess. But I live in the UK, so it's like we have Brexit, and then I come here and, you know. So I'm like, what do we do, right? And I believe that we every day have the choice to make a difference. And one of the things that we do every day is actually buying things, choosing products and services, whether it's food, the way we transport ourselves, or what we put on our bodies. So I invite you to think about voting with your wallets every day you choose a product, and this is how you can actually support young designers that are part of not just a label, for instance, or how you can start asking more questions to brands, or simply just join Fashion Revolution with the hashtag Who Made Your Clothes. There's so many actions, and I just invite you to be part of the movement. Thank you.
Fantastic. Can you sit here? It's
yes.
better for the cover. Thank you. Amazing presentation.
Thank you.
I love it. So it's really expensive to implement these technologies, like as a brand. Like if I make something like this, that is everything that I'm wearing today is local designers. But for example, if they want to put a label on this to track, it's really expensive.
So there are different levels of transparency, as I call them. The first one will be if you're a brand and you understand what's happening in your supply chain and you want to communicate that, there are ways right now we can help you to map your supply chain and allow that smart label to be part of your product. And there's so much more I didn't say, but like after purchase, you can actually transfer ownership of a garment to someone else, and this can actually enable circular economy key points like repairing, reselling, or renting, for instance. So it's like a way that you can actually track what's happening to the life of the garment. To your question, is it expensive? There's softwares out there that you can actually plug and play, but I believe that we need to find a way to unify the next, let's call it the next generation of sustainable fashion, in which we can actually have a single system that allows this to be part of a bigger movement rather than, again, creating silos and centralized like products. So that's why I'm working with these two multi-stakeholder initiatives, because the major brands, and I decided that I want to keep helping small designers to communicate their products, but I also know that this solution needs to be scalable, and that's where to answer your question, the price will allow to have a fair share of the cost of what that will be. So there's another level of things I haven't talked about, but tokenization. So it's another layer of what this technology can do. So we first have supply chains, then we have the ledger, like the database with all the information, and that will become a type of currency, like a token. So similar to what Stefan was saying, like how can creativity become a currency? So it is possible, and by doing that, you can actually create value that will pay itself. So I don't want to go too ahead, but my idea is that in the future will be free because it will be generating the value to cover the cost.
Fantastic. So we're open to questions.
You were talking before in a very graphic way, actually. You said to us, use your wallets as a vote. And but we know, as you know, when you vote for a politician or political party, you need to know their program. Now, if this technology is implemented in garments and products, that would be the program in a way, because you will know actually the history behind that. And you talk also about the secrecy in the fashion industry. Do you think that if governments and oblige companies to use this technology, it will change the mind of people and it will change probably the industry?
Thank you, Antonio, for your question. It's a very good one. I believe in fair share, and everybody, every stakeholder of the chain to be accountable for. So here we all are consumers, and if I go to the parliament, all the people I'll be speaking with, they are also consumers. So that's why I say vote with your wallet, because it's walk your talk. And if we are discussing new legislations, for instance, in the UK since 2015, we have the UK Modern Slavery Act that basically says that if any brand has modern slavery in their global supply chain, basically the CEO goes to jail. Nobody has gone to jail since then. So I just want to say that I think there is lots of complexities, layers here, and I don't have an answer to that, because in the current state of how the world operates and the systems in which we are and our political parties, we are not necessarily allowed to change the system from within. I believe that if we stop buying from a brand, what's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. If we stop voting for that person or that party, what's going to happen? So we need to go back to the roots and understand that we have the power those people are there to work for us. The laws are there to protect us. So we need to demand for what's right, what we want. We pay taxes. I mean, it's a moment of really understanding that social environmental impact go in hand with governance and investment. So this is the vision that I have of how can those, starting with those 4 key sectors, come together to actually create a new language and a new way of distributing responsibility within a supply chain of any kind. So I believe in distributed networks. Actually, Transparent Company is a consultancy, but I call it a collective intelligence network. Basically, it's the opposite of artificial intelligence, because yes, we need to connect, we need to bring in together our expertise. Nobody can solve the world problems in one day, but together we can. And I truly believe that the future is decentralized.
Hi, I'm Araceli. I'm the one that tagged you yesterday.
That was like
and confused you with Lauren. I'm sorry about that.
Don't worry.
But I'm here because I wanted to talk to you, listen to you. And now that I heard your journey from Venezuela to going to London and having no money and everything that happened in 2008, how did you start mixing blockchain with being a designer? That's kind of like mind-blowing. And now you are like the advocate in fashion for blockchain. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, when I was doing my master's in London College of Fashion, I decided to focus on what does it really mean, transparency in fashion, because I had this label for 2 years, and you know, people were interested, but there were so many questions, right? And I didn't have the answers. And I was like, I'm not gonna do something if I don't have the real answers. So I'm gonna go back to school. I'm gonna, you know, I think being in school is a luxury these days. So I had this scholarship. I was like, okay, I need to really focus and trigger the root cause of the problem. And that was the lack of verification. So I think being curious helps you to combine different worlds and try to find a solution. I'm a fashion designer by background, but I call myself these days a solution designer because it's about how do you solve a problem through any tools that are available out there. So that's kind of how it happened. And yeah, I embarked in a journey of the technology world. I met key people that helped me and advised me, and then the Alpaca project is something that I could have done as a designer, but I think collaboration is key. So I was looking for a designer that was willing to take this journey with me, and that was Martine Jarlarg, the Danish designer. And then, yeah, amazing things happened after that. And she's also traveling around the world, talking about it, and we're just trying to change the fashion industry with real tools and a real, true roadmap.
Well, congratulations. I believe the blockchain is the future too, so thank you for that.
Thank you. And it's one of the tools, but this, yeah.
I love it. The solution designer. I love that title. That's amazing. We need solutions.
I'm going to change my LinkedIn.
I know. We have another question over there.
Hi. Yeah. So my question's about the life cycle of the product after it's in the consumer's hands. So a little bit more about kind of how the technology works. I mean, to have it work properly, you have to scan at each location, right? So you would have to scan each garment, or can you somehow figure out how many of these products are ending up in the landfill at the end of the life cycle, and then possibly that could be used for data in the future to see, how well the process is going. So that's part one. Sorry, I always have a lot of questions.
No. I totally understand what you're trying to ask. We are developing a solution that can help cover all of those touch points. It's complex. It will require a lot of money to develop the tools, as well as the right partners to really commit to that timeline from when the garment was made, from the designer studio, for instance, when it got bought, when it's getting transferred, when it's being rented. So it's almost like, think about air miles when you travel. So yeah, like you collect and record all those air miles that will reward you, right? And the idea is that as a consumer or as the owner of the piece, the more you rent it, for instance, the more you earn, and the other person as well. So you create this new, like for instance, I have this app that is called Sweat Coin, that basically you create money whilst you walk. So I want to do that for fashion. So like the more you wear it, the more you lend it, the more you repair it, you gain a reward that you can then use for anything else. Of course, it will have to be within that platform, like maybe not just a label, but it's creating, I can create Neliana coin, and the more you go to my talks or events or you click or like, you earn a token that will allow you to create that new circular economy that we're talking about. And that's not happening right now or tomorrow, but that's the vision to enable true circularity and transparency with trusted information and data.
Thank you. So part two of the question is...
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. So I think a little bit of sustainability always has the issue of the people who don't believe in the problem of global climate change and all of that. So especially in this country, one of the reasons why Trump was elected is because there's a large population of Americans who don't live in the major cities like Miami and New York, and their perspectives of this entire economy is slightly different, and the type of gear that they wear is even different. I mean, they typically go for more of like hunting gear and stuff like that. So is there any initiative for you to kind of, and actually most of the people that speak at Fashion Week are from other countries, which is great because you're bringing it to us. But is there any awareness that you guys want to, or that you can create with brands in different areas that they call Middle America, that wear more of the like SPF gear, or way to get it into a different sector? Any ideas on that?
I don't have the answer for that necessarily, but all I can say, as I mentioned earlier, I believe in distributed networks, and the internet has helped us so much to connect those dots, like amazingly. All these designers are in not just a label platform, they are able to sell and ship a garment anywhere. Thanks to the internet, I think we need to be very careful with how we use the internet and how our data is being used as well for political reasons. But Cambridge Analytica happened, and we learned a lot from that. And I think that's one of my motivations. Transparency, I guess, comes from the fact that I come from a place that the system is completely trustless. And I remember the first time I voted, I didn't feel like I was voting because I didn't feel like that was going to be taken into account. But that's why I think that everything we do has an impact. So I think the answer is just like, let's use the tools that we have available as best as possible for the best message possible, so we get the best outcome.
Thank you. Any other question? Anyone? No? Okay, so we're gonna watch a video. Thank you so much. It was amazing. And you can use your wallet to make good decisions.
Now your wallet is here in a phone.
Exactly.
Thank you.